Welcome to Web3 and Whiskey, a podcast about how the decentralized internet will change our lives. In each episode, we react to a future when users and communities have all of the power, and when digital lives could be as vibrant as real life. And we drink whiskey while we're doing it. I'm your host, Gary Liu, and as always, I'm joined by Malcolm Ong, a product leader and serial entrepreneur. Now this week, unfortunately, Suresh Balaji isn't able to join us, but in his place, we have a very special guest, someone who is absolutely perfect for today's discussion. Before introducing our guests, we have our usual disclaimer. We don't show projects in this podcast, so consider any excitement that you hear from us to be personal opinion, and our opinion should never be taken as investment advice of any kind. So, our special guest, drum roll, our special guest today is Michael Yun, who is joining us in our hometown of Hong Kong. He's also in Hong Kong. We've hung out with him quite a number of times because we're all part of the Web3 community in Hong Kong. Now, Michael has had a long and illustrious career in enterprise technology. I'm not going to say how many years because I don't want to age you, Michael, so I'm going to leave that a secret.
Okay.
But he has touched everything from system architecture to commerce operations to being the chief technology officer for a media company, and even at one point, a chief information officer for a bunch of accountants. That must have been an extremely interesting job. But most importantly, for this conversation, Michael was the head of digital at Cathay Pacific and the head of product and technology for Asia Miles, one of the world's largest and most important loyalty rewards programs, and certainly a very, very important program here in Asia. So he has incredible depth and knowledge about loyalty and rewards. And not only that, like I mentioned, Michael is deeply within the Web3 community here in Hong Kong, an active investor and a mentor and a collector. And I know for a fact that he has put a lot of thought into rewards on the blockchain, because we've had, all three of us actually, Malcolm, me, and Michael, have had several conversations about this in the past. So what then is the topic today for which Michael is the perfect guest? The topic today is, what if Marriott Bonvoy moves onto the blockchain? Now, Michael, first of all, thank you for joining us, on the podcast.
Thank you, Gary. Great to be here. Such a long-winded introduction.
No, it's an important one. It gives the context, and you're such an impressive guy with so much knowledge. It's so great to have you for this specific conversation. I think you're the perfect guy to have this conversation with. You guys can see I'm not in Hong Kong. This is not a virtual background. I'm very lucky to be in Bali right now on the first family vacation that we've had in 3 years. So we're trying to make the most of it. I already got a bunch of color. So if I showed you my feet, you'll see the sock tan. It's pretty distinct at this point. Oh, you can hear my son in the background, and you're probably going to hear him throughout the podcast. But it's a family vacation. I got my MV5, my mobile mic with me, and clip-on light and everything, so we'll make the best of it. Malcolm, what about you? That's you're still in Hong Kong, right? You have a pretty fancy background there.
I am in Hong Kong. I'm in our temporary studio, thanks to one of our partners. So it looks like I'm maybe in Bali as well, but I'm not.
That is nice. Yeah, we've recorded in that space before. It was both our FTX and our Binance episodes were recorded in that space in real life. So I wish I were there with you. Michael, how many podcasts have you done in the past? Are you a podcast veteran?
No. I mean, I did a couple of YouTube interviews, but not exactly podcasts, right? Yeah. And those interviews, again, is about cryptos and Web3. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we flipped the switch because just a couple of months ago, I came on a video that you were hosting, that you're the moderator for, and you asked me some really tough questions. So I'm going to return the favor today and try and stump you about loyalty and rewards.
Bring it on.
Before we get to that topic, let's talk about our whiskeys. Malcolm, why don't you start? What do you have for us today?
Yeah, today I got a Glen Grant 18. It's a single malt from Speyside. So it's really interesting. You can see kind of the color here. A little bit floral and sweet and slightly oaky on the nose. And I tasted it earlier. It's a little bit of caramelly vanilla, actually. So it's quite nice.
It's good. Oh, that vanilla from the oak. Always a nice touch in whiskey.
Yeah.
Michael, what about you? What do you have today?
Well, actually, I'm still in the office, so I really cannot taste or give you guys a good tasting notes of it. But I have something with me, the Covenant. I bought it just before the pandemic in Taiwan, Yilan. Okay. But I'm not sure you guys know the Covenant actually is the name of the people live around Yilan district in Taiwan. So it's quite a new distillery, and the first bottling is actually from December 2008. So it's a pretty new winery. But right after this podcast, I will give it a try. Yeah.
Brilliant. You send us your tasting notes. We've had Cavalon on the podcast before, but we failed to mention that the name of the distillery comes from the name of the indigenous people that live in that part of Taiwan. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to disappoint you guys today. I don't have a whiskey on me. And part of the reason is that Bali is infamous for how much the spirits cost here. It's extremely expensive. And I didn't bring any whiskey with me on this trip. And when I went to the store to try and pick something up, I just couldn't bring myself to buying anything. I mean, it was not great stuff to begin with, and it was just so overpriced. However, I was introduced to a local Balinese spirit that I never had before, and actually never even heard of before. But most people who come to Bali supposedly know this spirit quite well, and it's called arak, A-R-A-K. Now, it's not just an Indonesian spirit. Arak is something that comes from the Middle East. But the Balinese have their version, traditional version of arak, which is a spirit that is fermented from sugar palm. So they use sugar palm. They sometimes use like coconut leaves and stuff like that. Maybe some glutinous rice, and they generally use it for like traditional ceremonies and rituals. And the interesting thing is that this spirit, it's not nice to taste. It's not something that, I mean, maybe there's really, really, really nice versions of it, but generally the arak you'll get is not for just sipping. It is for mixing. It's a pretty strong taste. It burns a little bit. Just like its Middle Eastern counterpart, it has kind of a licorice, star anise taste to it. So almost like Fernet. And I personally love licorice, but it's so strong you can smell it off the nose. It's not something that I think I would sip, but in cocktails, traditional Balinese cocktails, now it's become sort of this modern, beloved local spirit for the bars to mix cocktails with. It's fantastic. So I just learned about it recently, and if you're in Hong Kong, one place that you can go and ask for arak sometimes, not always, is one of our favorite bars called Penicillin. And the bartender there, Agong, is Indonesian, and I believe that once in a while he'll pull out arak and try to make something interesting with it. So thank you, gents, for bringing your whiskey. I have a Heineken, a beer with me. So cheers, and Michael, we'll hope that you enjoy your Cavalon right after we.
Cheers. Okay.
Cold beer, steamy, late afternoon, also can't be beat. All right, on to our discussion. What if Marriott Bonvoy moves onto the blockchain? I will start off by saying that I'm a very, very loyal Marriott Bonvoy member. I've been with Starwood, preferred guest, SPG, for years and years and years before Marriott bought SPG and rolled everyone into Bonvoy. And I've continued being a very loyal Bonvoy member all the way until, of course, the pandemic. And actually, even during the pandemic, I was like doing staycations in Hong Kong only at Marriott Bonvoy hotels, still spending my money at Marriott hotels. I'm like, I don't know. I think it's called Lifetime Platinum or something like that. And previously, I was inevitably going to become Lifetime Titanium or whatever that highest lifetime level is that they have. But now, post-pandemic, who knows, right? So I know the program really, really well. Now, we chose Marriott Bonvoy not specifically because there's something unique about the program that makes it interesting for this conversation. It's that it is huge. It's a huge program. And it is very well known all over the world. I'm pretty certain it is the world's largest hotel loyalty program, and probably by a country mile it is. And just the idea of a program that large, moving onto the blockchain fascinates us. So as I generally do, I set some boundaries for this discussion. So the boundaries today are, when we're talking about Marriott Bonvoy moving onto the blockchain, what I mean is that the rewards points that we've been all collecting for years and years and years, all of those Bonvoy points become blockchain-based tokens. The reward tokens themselves are fungible and they're tradable. Now, likely the memberships themselves become NFTs if it's fully deployed on blockchain. Whether or not the actual memberships of the NFTs themselves are tradable, or maybe they're not, maybe they're like soul bound, right? We can discuss, right, what the implications are for that decision. So if all those points move onto the blockchain and they become fungible tokens and they become tradable, the implications for users are huge. Generally speaking, I believe that they would be good for members. These points become far more liquid than they were before, because in the current program, the only way you can actually use those points and those points become valuable to you is by exchanging them for something that Marriott controls, right? Generally speaking, you exchange them for free nights at hotels. Okay. And they can price that however they want. And you know, like every other program out there, Marriott once in a while will come and tweak and change what the redemption ratio is. And everyone gets up in arms because it almost always is inevitably worse for the actual user and the member. But they're allowed to do that because they created a currency and they have full control over the inventory of the currency and the use of that currency, and therefore the value of that currency. So making it a fungible, tradable token is, I think, going to be much better for the users, because the users get to decide, the marketplace gets to decide how much each point is worth. And there are going to be different avenues for the exchange and therefore the use of these tokens that are outside of necessarily Marriott's control, which means the implication for the company itself is probably not so good. A secondary market will immediately exist, and the pricing of the token and therefore the economy that Marriott has created is no longer going to be in the hands of Marriott itself. And you know, these points actually sit on Marriott's books right now as liabilities, right? So what does that mean actually for their P&L? Well, I'm sure we'll get to that when we discuss it with Michael. So those are the guidelines. That's what we mean when we say, what if Marriott Bonvoy moves onto the blockchain? I want to start with Malcolm on the tech side. Is blockchain ready for this? Can it actually scale with a program as large as Marriott Bonvoy? And what exactly from the tech side would it mean for Bonvoy to move on to on-chain?
Yeah, I think if you imagine loyalty points being converted into fungible tokens and they sit on-chain, of course, all the benefits of blockchain apply here. So number one, transparency, immutability, right? This means that everyone can see exactly every single transaction, every single balance that exists in these programs, and they're more secure and they're immutable, cannot be changed. This brings a few different interesting points. Now, first of all, I think it actually minimizes errors and fraud because of the transparency and immutability of blockchain. But when it gets interesting is that because it's transparent, it actually creates a lot of opportunities for cross-program collaboration and whatnot. For example, every single other program that's out there, all Marriott's partners and Marriott's competitors can actually see how points are earned, burned, transferred, and vice versa, right? Marriott can do the same. Marriott is able to, if the other programs are also on the chain, Marriott is able to see that as well. But furthermore, I think it's also interesting that it creates opportunities for other industries to actually look into this. So imagine you're a retailer and you're actually really interested in particular customer segments that Marriott owns, right? So the lifetime titaniums of the world. I can immediately see, like, when's the last time they did any transaction with Marriott? When's the last time they transacted within the program as well? And how can I maybe leverage that data to my benefit and actually to the user's benefit and the customer's benefit as well, and personalizing, whatever offers I have for them. So that's number one, transparency, immutability. Number two is interoperability of tokens in a blockchain. I think this actually creates a standardization across industry because you're effectively replacing centralized databases within Marriott with a blockchain, right? With something that is accessible with everyone. So the way every program out there will work, Marriott and other hotels and maybe even airlines, et cetera, will be standardized because the database, the centralized company-owned databases are replaced. And so I think this actually minimizes the friction between integrating between partners. So Marriott wants to onboard a bunch of new partners. I think the integration friction is minimized there. And from a customer standpoint, it also actually creates a seamless way of exchanging token value from one program to another, right? I can easily do that from one program to another. That brings me to the third point, which Gary touched upon, is this means that points can now have value publicly, quote unquote publicly, and they can be bought and sold on the open market, right? They can be transferred. I can effectively share points with my family and friends very, very easily by myself without going through a program. I can buy and sell on the open market. I can effectively maybe jump statuses. What if I can immediately just buy off 100,000 points from Gary, right? And vice versa. Gary's probably sitting on a bunch of points. What if it expires at some point, right? So this actually gives him liquidity. And then finally, I think operational efficiency is interesting here. So the thought of, when's the last time you had a missing mile or a missing point? And then you had to like maybe file a claim to say, hey, that flight I took or the hotel I stayed at, I actually earned this much points, or I deserve this many points. And maybe the hotel took 6 months to actually get back to you, right? So operational efficiency, if this was all on the blockchain, it would be near real time. Every single transaction is near real time. And so all of that would all that overhead would go away. Now, one last thing I'll mention though, is that of course, that's kind of the benefits of this. I don't know much about how the economies work underneath this program. And Michael, you can tell us a little bit more, but I would definitely imagine that the structure of implementing blockchain would completely break the economics of the current programs, right? And the current program structures will probably need to change. I probably can't just be throwing free points whenever a user signs up for a credit card. I don't know, right? So I think that would be an interesting, point there.
Well, let's actually jump right into that, because Michael knows these programs in and out. He not only knows the technology behind it, but he really knows the economics as well. So we've already started by kind of describing why tokenizing loyalty programs will be good for the user, good for the member. And I think it's pretty clear why it would be good for the member. Just added liquidity, allowing the points to have open market value. And it opens up so many other possibilities for use of the token and for, taking advantage of the fact that I'm loyal. So all of these things, great for the user. Why is it not so good for the corporate? From your point of view, I mean, this is not a new idea, moving loyalty onto blockchain. In fact, it would seem almost native as an application for blockchain, and yet there is no scaled consumer loyalty program on the blockchain. And it's not a technology issue. It's because it doesn't seem to make sense for the companies right now. Why does it not make sense?
The way I see it is, Malcolm actually raised quite a lot of good things about why we want to do that. But if you're the loyalty operator, you probably know that your points, your miles are already digitized. Now you want to change it from digitized to tokenized, right? So put it in the blockchain. So definitely there are some good things like streamlined operations, a lot more transparent. And for me, I think that's one key thing to the loyalty operator that putting in blockchain or tokenize it definitely will help is you know exactly the cost of each point when you issue the point. Well, imagine 3 years ago, you pay this amount of money, you earn 10,000 points. This year, you need to pay maybe some more money or less money to earn the same 10,000 points. The cost of points is actually different. And therefore, is previously, without that technology, it's actually quite difficult for operator to tell, am I making more money or less money? Should I issue more miles or points or less? Something that I think blockchain can help. And another thing that I think that really useful is how we can, you two probably know, how we can make it programmable money. By blockchain or smart contract, we make it programmable. I tend to think there will be a lot more use cases that we can use with this implementation. But on the other hand, I think the business concern is if I'm not a loyal customer of Bonvoy, but I buy 100,000 points from someone, should you as a hotel operator treat me as a loyal customer or not? or a potential loyal customer or not. Something we have to figure out. Or we can put it in the two different types of points or tokenize the point. One colored point, one non-colored point that you can tell, oh, these are from a loyal customer. These are not from a loyal customer. These are potential new customer. Maybe these kind of things that we should consider as well.
But then how do we define that, right? What do you mean by loyal customer versus not loyal then?
Well, I mean, but even from a smart contract point of view, right? If it is something that is issued by the brand, the smart contract can say when it's on issue, if it sits in the wallet that it was issued into, then it's considered as a quote unquote loyalty point, right? Mm-hmm. But then if it's traded, then whichever wallet ends up in, it's no longer a loyalty point. It is some other point. It's the same fungible token, but the smart contract says that it you know, maybe it gets devalued, or maybe it just gets treated differently in the way that you can exchange it. So with smart contracts, you know, Michael hits on a really interesting point. It's programmable like that. You can actually make those distinctions, even though it's fungible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then you imagine that loyalty here, right? And the whole point of a loyalty program is for retaining customers, for rewarding them so that they will actually come back. And if a particular customer is offloading a bunch of points, you can either imagine that, well, they're either no longer loyal and they have no intent to actually transact, or they're less, quote unquote, less loyal, or they just are sitting on so many things that actually doesn't change their behavior. So then it actually gives the hotel an opportunity to potentially acquire a new user, like you said, Michael, a potentially loyal. So I don't know if this is bad for business.
I would agree with you. Like I will use myself as an example. I live in Hong Kong, and over the course of the last, I mean, besides the 3 years of COVID, prior to COVID and then after COVID, I fly Cathay Pacific most of the time. But prior to moving to Hong Kong, I was a very, very loyal American Airlines customer. And I have my entire life sold into Advantage, and that's the American Airlines loyalty program, and Marriott Bonvoy. And when I moved to Asia, even though I was flying CX, because they're in one world, I never shifted into Cathay's loyalty program. And I've always been waiting, like one day maybe I will ask for a status match.
Yeah.
And without a status match, without a status match, I would not move, because I just get too many advantages of being an American Advantage member, an elite member of American Advantage. But if I had an opportunity to actually buy in to a certain status, I would probably consider it. But there is no such way, right? I mean, at least not for Cathay. I don't know if Cathay still does one of those mileage challenges where over the course of a few months you can fly X number of miles and you get a specific status. But if there were a way to actually just buy into a status, I may have switched a few years ago.
Yeah. Well, indeed, in the airline industry, there are a couple of status matching startups. They're approaching different airlines and they say, oh, I can offer this. If you are a diamond tier of a certain airline, you can move to another airline into the top tier as well. So definitely there's something really useful for loyal customer, because I'm now in Hong Kong, but let's say I move to US and I'm going to loyal to American Airlines. Please do my status matching. I don't want to start from scratch, to earn all the points and miles. Yeah. But just, I'm not sure about the hotel industry, whether they exist something like this, status matching for hotel industry. Yeah.
But status matching, I guess my point is that status matching on airlines is still not the same as like solving the cold start problem. Right, I'm moving to Hong Kong for the first time. I want to become an elite member of Cathay, and it takes a year. It takes pretty much a year, right, to gain that status for most people. And yeah, with the amount of flights and the amount of money that you actually have to spend, it's not something that you can get done in like 2 months or even 6 months. So it disincentivizes me from switching. So what if there was a way, and I don't understand, I don't really know why airlines haven't developed an easier way for somebody to solve the cold start problem, where I raise my hand to say, I'm going to be loyal here on out, right? To Malcolm's point, this is a retention program and you will retain me as long as I can go from 0 to elite status like that. And I will be willing to pay for it. And that doesn't seem to be available, but I think that with a tokenized program, that could become available. Yeah. I don't know, Michael, I don't know if you have any insight as to why airlines don't do that. Why they don't allow you to buy into a status and then airlines use that status to retain a customer long term, a high paying customer long term.
Well, I guess initially they just don't have this belief that someone will really move from one airline group to my airline group as a loyal customers. We just cannot tell. But nowadays, I think there's one option. Many airlines are considering it. And also, Malcolm earlier mentioned about use case that I want to share my points to my friends or family members. And as you may be aware, there are many loyalty programs have a concept called pooling. So you can set a group of good friends or family members, and then you pool all the miles together. And maybe this year I earn a lot of points of miles, and then I can transfer to a member in that pool, such that they can get a free hotel nights in the next holiday. So this one can solve by that. I think there are a lot of merit to do all these things. But then we have to figure out, what if you can earn miles outside the network, or earn points outside the network, and then use the point outside the network? Then in this special situation, I think the loyalty operator will be a little bit of concern that how can I prove the points you earned outside the network is actually legitimate vendors or partners. All of a sudden you earn 1 million points. How can I tell you really pay a lot of money, or you did a lot of transactions from the partner and then earned the 1 million points? And then all of a sudden, there are so many members have so many points. It's just like a inflated ecosystem. That's something I think many operators are worried about.
But isn't then the benefit of blockchain is if those programs were on the blockchain, you could actually see how legitimate they were?
Well, you see the numbers increase, garbage in, garbage out, but you don't know the reason behind how this number increased.
Well, the total pool wouldn't increase, right? I mean, the distribution of it might increase, so therefore the users that are actually holding on to at least one token might increase overall. But the total pool of tokens would not increase unless the brand is actually issuing more tokens. So I actually want to dig into this point, though, Michael, because you mentioned this to us before, and this is really, really interesting. The transference of points is heavily guarded and gated in traditional programs, and I've never fully understood why. Because once somebody is, and especially in single brand programs, right? Like, if I earn a point and I redeem it, it's in one program it's the same calculation, at least in my dumb little head, it's the same calculation. So why limit it? I mean, there are gray market ways to sell airline miles and Marriott Bonvoy points and then transfer them from one account to another. You do the transaction completely off of the proper ledger. And it's sometimes really sketchy. People get scammed all the time because of it. And these programs really do try to shut them down, ostensibly for consumer protection, but really it seems like it's for the protection of their own control. Do you really think that if we were able to, even without selling, just move fungible tokens from one wallet to another and loyalty points, that it would be bad for a loyalty program operator?
Moving from one to another one, I think is okay, especially they are one of your family members or good friends. But always back to the first party, how they earn the points. Let's say Bonvoy have a partnership with a Tumi luggage brand. And let's say the partnership is, if you buy $5,000 worth of luggage, and then you get 200 points of Bonvoy. And then one day, Bonvoy system saying that Gary received 400 more points. And then for Bonvoy, they need to check whether you really spent $10,000 in the luggage company, such that you earn the 400 points. Otherwise, we are just issuing more points and more points to members. But how can we tell? I mean, if you're a closed network, interestingly, Bonvoy just have a huge advertising wall in the MTR station today, this week. saying that there were 30 hotel brands or hotel chains. So as Gary said, it's a really big loyalty program. So within that closed network, that's fine. You spend money in one of these 30 hotel brands, you earn the points, and then use it in other hotels within that network. That's perfectly fine. Yeah. I think mostly his concern is you earn the points outside the network and you use the point outside the network.
Okay, so can we talk about specifics for that? Because this is what you had to deal with at Asia Miles. Yeah. Because Asia Miles is not a single brand program. Unlike Marriott Bonvoy. Marriott Bonvoy, for all intents and purposes, it's a single brand. All the hotels are owned by a parent company, and you earn within the network. You spend within the network. But Asia Miles, you can earn in all sorts of different places and then spend in all sorts of different places. That was part of the success of Asia Miles. But according to you, it seems that it ratchets up the complexity of making these points tradable. So do you actually think that even if it's already hard enough for a Marriott Bonvoy to move on the blockchain, do you think it's ever possible for a multi-brand loyalty program to actually exist on blockchain where you can literally earn and spend in different places? And therefore, if the token becomes fungible, you can buy off of an open marketplace and then figure out the arbitrage and spend where the point is most valuable. And eventually it could become somebody has to take the hit of getting all of these points and then dishing out a bunch of different benefits and products without having actually had any loyal activity that earned those points to begin with. Is that going to stop multi-brand loyalty programs from ever existing on blockchain?
No, I think it's still doable. It's just that you need to have a lot of work like a team to manage the fraud. You have to have a team to look after why such accounts are created, why certain points are earned in such a short period of time, for example. And then you have a team to understand or do a lot of analytics to understand that it's really a real transactions or not, these kind of things. And for the multi-brand loyalty program, I think as long as all those brands are really reputable brands and you have ways to check the transactions, certainly it's doable. Yeah, I do think so. It just needs some effort, I think. What do you think, Malcolm? Technically, anything that we can do, yeah.
I mean, one question I actually have about that is, you talk about fraud and you talk about bad actors earning a bunch of points. And the thing that came into mind for me was, okay, well, what if the Bonvoy program was on the blockchain, it no longer is a system where points are come out of thin air? What if there is effectively a limited supply of points, a limited supply of tokens? And so, absolutely, every single point that is being earned is tied to a legitimate, thing. But more importantly, there's no possibility of just a million points out of thin air coming out of nowhere.
Well, again, I think if there's a way to backtrack every single point, every single transactions to certain partners' books, then I think that should be okay. Yeah.
I want to dig into the liability side of all of this. The fact that points sit on companies' P&Ls as liability. Once they're issued, they expect that a percentage of them will be redeemed, and therefore, in their books, here are things that we've already actually, these are liabilities, right? This is debt, right? That might come due at some point. And the reason why they're liabilities is because in today's world, once the points are redeemed, the points are gone. They're worthless, right? Because they're not actually fungible anything. It's a made-up currency, right? And so when the points are redeemed, it gets taken out of a customer's account. And it's not like it suddenly appears inside of the company's account. But if we were to deploy loyalty programs at scale on the blockchain, and they are fungible tokens that can be tradable, technically speaking, that changes. The points or the tokens are redeemed. They're paid back. Brand gives, Marriott Bonvoy rewards Malcolm for staying at the St. Regis, and Malcolm gets a bunch of points. And then Malcolm decides to redeem it to go stay at a Ritz-Carlton resort somewhere. And those tokens go to Marriott Bonvoy. Suddenly now Marriott Bonvoy actually has real tokens, like real assets, virtual assets, that are back in their treasury, which they can then deploy more of or they themselves, if they want liquidity, can actually go and sell on the open market for cash. So does that make the tokenized program more attractive to a company? Is that even in the minds, like, is that paradigm shift? Has that been considered by corporate leaders at these rewards programs? Not to say that they're not smart and thinking about this all the time, but it makes so much sense to me that this is a massive added advantage to the enterprise brand who wants a loyalty program, that the points aren't just burned. They're actual assets that can now no longer just sit on liabilities, but are things that they can give out there. Anyway, Michael, what do you think about that?
Yeah, actually, I think likely we'll just treat it as a token that will burn, they'll redeem the token instead of resell it in the open market. It's an interesting thought.
But why would you, right? Like that's not how companies deal with cash, with fiat, right? Like it's not like that's obviously not how they deal with it. So why would they not treat it as a different currency that then, when redeemed, suddenly sits on your treasury as an asset? That might be the hurdle that loyalty executives need to get over. And when they do get over it, then we're going to see more and more of these loyalty programs start experimenting with blockchain.
Well, certainly I believe many loyalty programs are experiencing blockchain. It's just not tokenizing the point. They experience blockchain in other areas, yeah.
So, Michael, tell us about that. I know this is a little bit off topic, but we've had this side conversation before, and I found it fascinating the way that you guys did experiment with blockchain at Cathay Pacific and Asia Miles. But also, I know that you know of other examples. But what do you mean by that? How are loyalty programs experimenting with blockchain technologies aside from tokenizing their points?
Well, I think a couple of areas, such as the tier status. It can be an NFT, can be use of blockchain technologies. And by using the blockchain technology with appropriate data analytics, you can get a better members engagement. And of course, as I mentioned before, that as a programmable token, using smart contract, you can do a lot of crazy things like special deals or marketing campaigns, everything by using the smart contract technologies. But the real thing is there's no more settlement, no more reconciliation. Everything is real time and transparent. I think it's really, really cool for a loyalty program that used the traditional CRM to handle all this. And the other thing is, as I mentioned, the cost of every single point. You can track it with blockchain, and therefore a lot easier to tell how healthy the loyalty program is, and also the lifetime value of each member. I think all these are a lot easier to implement and achieve with blockchain technologies. Yeah.
Besides those that are using blockchain as it sounds like sort of data and just enterprise infrastructure to make data management and settlements, all these things more efficient. There are major corporates that are starting to move their rewards experiences onto blockchain. And one of the big ones that announced just a couple of months ago was Starbucks. The Starbucks Odyssey program, it actually allows the members, Starbucks members, to collect what Starbucks has announced as stamps. That's what they're referring to them as. And these are NFTs. And there are two ways to acquire stamps. One is by engaging in what Starbucks is talking about is calling journeys, as effectively these interactive, probably behavioral programming activities to teach you more about Starbucks, their history, about coffee and stuff like that, to make you more loyal. These are engagement activities. And as you go through these engagement activities, you will earn stamps along the way. Or you can purchase stamps. So they're going to have a marketplace where right now they've only mentioned that there's going to be a primary sale of stamps. So they're going to treat us as merchandise. I'm going to sell limited edition stamps and you're going to buy them. And as you collect stamps, either through engagement activities, earned stamps, or bought stamps through the marketplace, you will start gaining more points for Starbucks points, the traditional Starbucks points for your activities, for your purchases and stuff like that. So the points themselves, as of right now, there's no indication that the points themselves, the ones that you can actually spend at the store, that you earn from actually buying coffee, those points I don't think they're being tokenized. At least they haven't made mention of it. It's the stamps that are NFTs, and they're really treating them as earned, like rewards that, ratchet up your points earning potential, or they're selling them as merchandise. So if you buy enough, then you'll be able to, gain more points from your coffee purchase. These stamps also gate certain experiences. So based on the stamps that you do collect, you will be able to get access to unique benefits and experiences that people can't even get from rewards points, right? That's I think that's also what they're going to be doing. So realistically, part of the program is moving on a blockchain, but the key part of it, which is the actual rewards points themselves, may not be. And more importantly, we still don't know that even these NFTs, whether or not they're going to be tradable. Can I earn through loyalty activities stamps and then sell them to another member who wants to gain access to to increase points or unique experiences?
I think actually it's a really good point that points are not tokenized, but the stamps or the rewards are tokenized such that, for example, let's say one reward is the experience, a tour to the very first store in Seattle for Starbucks, but somehow I can't make it to fly to Seattle. Then I can trade that reward with someone by using the blockchain technology or some marketplace or platform. But not the point, but the reward. The reward's as a token. I think that's a really good way as well. Yeah.
Let's get back to the original question. And I do want each of us to actually answer and talk about what if Marriott Bonvoy were to move the program onto blockchain. What would that new rewards program actually look like? Let's start with Malcolm. What do you think it's going to look like?
I mean, first of all, I mentioned earlier that they would definitely need to change the economics of this program, right? So we would need to figure out if points are suddenly tokenized and tokens are suddenly on the blockchain, and these, therefore, tokens can be tradable on the open market. We'd have to figure out, the programs would need to figure out exactly what the economics behind this, how it should be structured. Because again, points are no longer and tokens are no longer just coming out of thin air. I can't effectively mint these tokens as much as I want to entice users to sign up for credit cards or entice them to do XYZ. Now, of course, these tokens are actually used as incentive structures, but they need to be much, much more well structured, aka the tokenomics behind this. So I think that's part one. Beyond that, I think maybe the reason why a lot of these programs hesitate to move there, because we actually don't know how the market would react to it, and we haven't figured out or thought through some of the scenarios of what would happen. So to Michael's point, suddenly all these tokens are now worth something. So what if the prices are wildly changing? What if on one day points is worth, let's call it 1 cent, and the next day it's worth 50 cents? That would create chaos in a way, right? So that's where I go back to, definitely the economics of here needs to be really, really, really thought through and really, really well structured, such that there's guardrails around, this possibility.
Definitely, the tokenomics are really important. At the same time, in the loyalty program, there are many different areas can tokenize, like the reward, like the hotel room night reservation. You can tokenize it, such that you can easily trade it in the market. And as I mentioned, there are many different ways to really utilize the blockchain technology or the tokenization itself. So maybe don't stop just about point. Maybe look further to see any other things that we can tokenize something for loyalty program, especially the tokenomics when you have earn and burn partners outside the network. I mean, there's an area the loyalty operator really need to look at it carefully. Yeah.
One thing I'll say though is if tokens are really, really tied to solid tokenomics, then that means the incentive structures are really, really baked in a sense that when I'm giving someone a token, it's worth some real dollar, right? As opposed to right now, if Bonvoy gave me, call it 100 points, it's probably not worth anything until I reach a certain level where I can actually use it, In other words, there's no liquidity there. But because every token on the blockchain is worth something and is immediately liquid, then I can truly say, like, if I want to incentivize the user to do action A, I'm basically giving them that one token, and that's worth real value. That I think is super interesting. The other second point that I thought is kind of interesting is that would this almost create a proxy market of like people wanting to effectively quote unquote invest in Marriott? And would that create a proxy market where I'm just effectively buying and selling these points and they're worth something? And I don't know, depending on the direction that Marriott's headed, right? Would that actually like increase or decrease the value of the points, right? In other words, the market value of points and tokens increasing or decreasing regardless of the activity that's happening in their world. So it's purely based on market perception, right? And the game of games that's happening there.
Yeah, Malcolm, actually, I think that's the biggest implication of this what if. I actually think that this should be a no-brainer for Marriott to at least try. Because the moment Marriott moves its points on the blockchain, that token, whatever they call it, will be one of the most important and valuable tokens that exists. Not only because Marriott Bonvoy already has 160 million users. So you're bringing 160 million wallets onto an ecosystem. You're literally being able to deposit and already have tokens in 160 million wallets from day one. But the second reason is that suddenly you have a token that is immediately redeemable at real businesses all over the world. Hotels. Right? Yeah, travel and staying in hotels in the Marriott network is not for everyone, but there's at least 160 million people who really deeply care about it. Not to mention, the multiple other 100 millions that actually stay at Marriott hotels over the course of a year. But it's the fact that it is now like the asset, the actual point itself, a crypto token can immediately be spent in the real world as fiat, right? And so I actually think that the market cap of this token would skyrocket. Today, the token itself as a liability on Marriott's books is a couple $1 billion. The rewards points. Okay, it's a couple $1 billion. So it's already large. I think that if they make it an actual token and they allow for secondary market trading of that token will skyrocket, and it will be very, very quickly within the top 20 market cap tokens in the world. And it'll be amazing to see a traditional business like Marriott take that gamble. Now, Malcolm's right. Michael also mentioned this. The economics of the program will have to change. They can't just willy-nilly be giving out points anymore because of the fact that you're giving out actual cash. They can't control and dial down the value of that token as easily as they have in the past, right? In just the last couple of years. SPG used to be worth somewhere between 2.3 to 2.8 cents per point. And now this year it's dialed back down to 0.9 as a Marriott Bonvoy point. So they have significantly reduced the value of the points we've accrued over time. They're going to have far less ability to do so when the open marketplace is kind of valuing and pricing these points. They're going to have to actually go and change the redemption value of these things. And that's a little bit harder. They can't use it as openly for marketing campaigns. Right now, so much of Marriott Bonvoy's marketing is driven by do this and get X number of free points. That's how their credit card partnerships work as well. You get a MasterCard, and then you spend $20,000 on it over the course of X number of months, and then you get X number of points. I think it's $5,000, something like that. They have to be much more careful about those economics, so the nature of the program will change. But I really honestly think that the amount of value that they'll immediately create and the fact that they control the treasury of these points, these tokens, and the market cap that is of these tokens, what that will be in a short term, will be worth all of the trouble and all of the necessary change in program dynamics. And I think for users, I think this would be amazing. I think that it would bring a totally new type of value to a loyalty program, and it would also immediately onboard, well over 100 million new people into Web3 to understand what virtual assets are, why they are going to be part of our lives for the long-term future. And I think that's good for the development and innovation of the Web3 space. Any final thoughts on Marriott Bonvoy or any other loyalty program on the blockchain? As you can see here, we've talked from day to night, literally here in Bali.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts?
Well, for me, go for it. Make it easy to use, easy to understand, and make sure the tokenomics are really not that complicated for the members, but at the same time, easy to manage from the operator's point of view.
Yeah, I think on my side, I agree with you, Gary, that this to me seems like a great opportunity for Marriott, and a lot of benefits for the users as well. More benefits to come if this is actually adopted across the industry and across the whole travel industry, not just hotels. But I suspect that the company that actually moves first into this, they're not, there's a high barrier for Marriott to be the first one to move, because there's so much risk, right? So much things to lose if there's like one small detail that is not structured properly. If something within the economics is like slightly off, it could, all come crashing down. So I think it's almost like the innovator's dilemma in a way. It's like they're just too afraid that something could go wrong. And so they're like, our current program, it's working just fine. No need to really like, quote unquote, innovate on it.
Well, this has been a fascinating discussion. Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Michael, for joining me on this. I don't think we have a conclusion except for the fact that we are all very interested to see who makes this significant move first. I think all three of us agree that it's good for the consumer. We all recognize that it would change the business of loyalty, the traditional business of loyalty that we know so well as consumers, and Michael knows very, very well as an operator and a technologist. It would change the economics. It would change marketing. It would change the expected user behavior. And we're not sure that big companies that are really well established, that have loyalty programs that really, really work today, would be the ones to make the leap first, because there's too much risk, and they probably don't even know how to calculate that reward. But for us as consumers, I can't wait to see the day where a major loyalty program becomes tokenized, because I think that we would all benefit from it quite a bit. So this conversation we'll continue to having. Michael, we hope that you'll come back and join us on another podcast and talk more and tell us more stories about how you've utilized blockchain technologies in different ways for enterprise and corporate infrastructure in the past as well, and maybe come and tell us about some of the NFT projects that you're following that you care a lot about. But this has been wonderful. Thank you for joining us. This has been Web3 Whiskey. Please subscribe to this podcast on your favorite audio platform, and if you don't mind looking at our faces, smash the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Join us next week as we engage in more Web3 debates and drink more whiskey. And maybe I'll bring a bottle of Arak the next time around. I'm Gary Liu. Thank you for listening.